Hello to the world and to the kingdom citizens. I greet you in the precious holy name of Yeshua Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, who said in his word, John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Hi, I'm Dr. John Curry, and welcome to the embassy of the kingdom of heaven on earth. If you want to follow this podcast, please subscribe to JC Global Embassy TV1. Ring the bell and hit the thumbs up button. Today's message is entitled, To Oppress a Race. To Oppress a Race. To oppress a race and then label its reaction as mental illness is not only morally wrong, but is criminal, barbaric, and uncivilized. You see, the majority of black people in America are still stuck in a state of Stockholm Syndrome, which is a feeling of trust and affection taken by the victim towards the captors. Now, what does that mean? That simply means that as black people, we was kidnapped and brought to America. And while being here, we have developed Stockholm Syndrome, which simply means we have more affinity towards our white slave masters than we do towards one another. And in Stockholm Syndrome, the tendency is to have more love for your captors, as they did in Germany. When they was kidnapped in Germany and held hostage, they developed a relationship with the hostage taker. And while developing that relationship with the hostage taker, they began to feel good about who was holding them captive. And when they came in to try to rescue them from the hostage taker, the hostages decided to fight for the hostage taker. In other words, they fell more in love with the perpetrator, those that was abusing them and beating them. They felt in love with them. This is where we get the phrase Stockholm Syndrome. And as black people in America, I believe that we're suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. It appears that we have more affinity for our captors. You're still captured. You're still a slave. You just have different titles now. You was let out of slavery in 1863 through 1865. The actual document was written in 1863, but later on it took so long before people to be able to be released from slavery. And this is where we get the phrase Juneteenth. From 1863 through 65, you was considered to be free. But the amendments had to be done, and those amendments was done that not only allowed you to be free, you had the 13th Amendment, which caused slaves to be free, but you wasn't free. You had the 14th Amendment, which granted you citizenship rights, and to this day, you still have never been treated as a citizen. And then you have the 15th Amendment, which gave you voting rights. And to this day, they're still trying to take away your vote. In essence, there would be no protests if you were a citizen. If America would treat black people as citizens, there would be no need to protest. There would never have been a need for civil rights. We're fighting for things that they say they already given us, but they given them to us on paper, but they have never given us to them in practice. Because someone say that they're going to move from your policies to the law, they can give you the law, but if the heart is not right, they can still practice slavery upon you. You remember I told you that we're still dealing with those paddy rollers riding in those paddy wagons, asking for your papers. We're still being lynched on the street. We're still being shot, knee on neck, boot on neck. We're still going through all the traumas that we was going through during slavery. You still have to show your papers. But yet, your mindset is still Stockholm Syndrome. You're just in love with the white man. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be. I'm just saying you need to know your position while you're claiming that love. Do you love getting pats on the head by the white man? Do you love it when they call out your name in the presence of other black folks? Do you feel good when you get a raise and all the other black people don't get one? Do you love it to move to a predominantly all-white neighborhood and so you can feel like you're doing good when a few years they move out and leave you by yourself? Are you afraid to go to black communities and walk the block? Who are you really? Are you a white man disguised as a black man because you live in the black skin that you live in? Who are you really? You got to know that you came from the great continent. And the great continent is Al-Kabulan. That's the name here, Al-Kabulan. I call it home. I know years ago people used to say, well, man, I'm going back down home. If you're up north, you're in Michigan, you're in Chicago. Let's say you're in Waukegan, Kenosha. That's a shout out. Let's say you're in any of those places, Milwaukee. And you said, I'm going down home. That means you're going back to Mississippi, or maybe you're going back to Alabama, or maybe you're going back to North Kakalaki, that's North Carolina. Or maybe you're going down south and you say, I'm going down home. But see, when you go to the continent of Africa, you're going back home. That's Al-Kabulan. That's the original name for Africa. Now, the word Africa comes from, I believe it was a Greek or German where he was called Africano. And he gave the continent the name. But we are of the land of the blacks. That's what Al-Kabulan means, the land of the blacks. And yet, we're still stuck with the mindset of Stockholm Syndrome. We have more affinity for our white masters than we do for ourselves. And that must stop. Along with Stockholm Syndrome, black people are also suffering from post-traumatic slave syndrome. Centuries of slavery in the United States and across the world, followed by institutional and systematic, structured racism upon a people. You see, post-traumatic slave syndrome is going to take some time because some of us still see each other as rivals. Some of us still see each other as I'm better than you because I have a PhD. Some of us think we're better because I'm better than you because I live on the hill and you live in the valley. I'm better than you because I live in the suburbs and you live in the hood. I'm better than you because I can read and you can't. I'm better than you because I make more money than you. You're making minimum wages and I'm making 6 figures. I'm better than you because I'm lighter than you. I'm better than you because I have gotten a PhD. We're still operating like Willie Lynch wanted us to. You know, the tall slave versus the short slave, the intelligent slave versus the not so intelligent slave, the slave that live on the hill versus the slave that live in the fields. The slave that's the houseboy versus the slave that's the field hand. We're still operating in the same twisted sickness that we must come out of. So yes, black people, we're still suffering from Stockholm Syndrome and post-traumatic slave syndrome. But I tell you, our time is now. Yes, we must heal from Stockholm Syndrome, loving our captors so much as we hate ourselves. We must break through the psychosis of post-traumatic slave syndrome as we heal and build ourselves. No one is coming to help us. We must heal and build our own selves. We must love each other. We must be tenderhearted to each other. We must have patience with each other. We must reach out to each other. We must adorn and support and care for each other, because all of us in America and throughout the diaspora of the world are suffering from the same brutality that's been given to all of us by the same European white man. And until we can come together and bring ourselves together, we will be suffering apart. But I believe it's time now for us throughout the diaspora, especially in America, as well as on the continent of Africa, our cable land. I believe it's our time now to heal each other as we build each other and begin to build our communities and build our continent as we both rise together. The oppression of a race, and then they label us with mental illness, is nothing but a trick and a con and a scheme that only a wicked mind could think of. But we're now rising on the inside. We're rising in our mind. Our minds are being renewed. And as we renew our minds and renew ourselves and renew our own consciousness toward each other, and as we begin to integrate our minds and bring us all on one accord, the world has not seen the end of this story, the African glory story that is continuing to develop as we move past Stockholm Syndrome and move past post-traumatic slave syndrome. We will be the people that the world know that we can be. I trust that you will break out of Stockholm Syndrome, and I trust that you will move past post-traumatic slave syndrome, and I also trust that we'll begin to love each other as Black people, so the world will know that we are here to heal and build ourselves back up to where we were before we came to America.